Hey, it's Jon-Mark Patterson, back again as the Reactionary Hippie. Got a few more thoughts for you. And first I want to say it was encouraging to get some nice comments from that first video. This isn't the easiest thing for me to do. Stare at a camera and talk to an audience. It's not right here. But I know you're out there, and I'm grateful that you cared about what I had to say. And I'm going to keep offering some comments here. So, yeah, Reactionary Hippie's back. If you have any questions or comments, throw them in the comments section with the video, and I will pay attention to those and try to respond. Here's what's on my mind today. I thought about some, related ideas, and then kind of grouped them under a category. Not really a category, more like a saying, an aphorism, if you will. Yeah. And that is this. You don't know what you don't know, but you do know more than you think. And so that deserves some explanation. That's where I'm going. You don't know what you don't know. One of the strangest and most persistent things about being human is that we hear and see what we want to hear and see. It's a good survival strategy, right? We've got rules of thumb. We're wired a certain way. Information's flooding in all the time. We have to pick and choose the information that matters, or we get killed by a wild animal or run over by a car. We have to sort out what's in the world and figure out what's most important. And usually our minds do a pretty good job of shortcutting it for us and helping us live in the world. But they also give us a certain bias. We take in information that fits what we already think is true. And we adapt. It's not so much that we consciously, deliberately lie to ourselves, is that we just fit what's out there into the frameworks we already have. So we're always going to miss stuff. We're always going to have a bias that's built in. And we're going to have a hard time seeing that, right? Because we're actually wired to be that way. So it's really hard to step back outside of that. We're all that way. I think social media exacerbates this problem. We have these algorithms that feed up to us in our news feeds exactly what Facebook thinks we want to see, right? Or Instagram does the same thing. I mean, anything that is responding and reacting and has algorithms to try to make us spend more time with the app, but also make us happy and enjoy the experience, is feeding back what it already thinks we want to see. So we get ever deeper into our bias if we don't really work hard to overcome that. And you just end up having friends on Facebook who reflect just what you think in the worst case. You just keep reacting in a way that puts you deeper and deeper into your silo. And you don't see things that are outside of that. So how do we get beyond that sort of thing? It's tough. I want to talk about something else that goes along with that. And that is just how bad a job our elites do at really figuring out what's coming next. Because they may write well, they may have incredible creativity, they may be brilliant in their narrow areas, but they're still human. And they still reflect their biases, and sometimes their popularity and their impact and effectiveness in the culture is because they're feeding in the biases of the people who are reading them or watching them or reacting to them. I just reread a great short story by Kurt Vonnegut called Welcome to the Monkey House. And it's set in 1968 when I was born. And so I'm not going to spoil it, but let me set it up a little bit. It's this dystopian near future with unbelievable overpopulation. And there's this coincidence of interest, right, between the technocratic scientist types and the religious fundamentalists. The religious fundamentalists don't want anyone to enjoy sex. And the science technocrats want to get a handle on this exploding population. So they team up and numb everybody from the waist down so they don't like sex and they won't have babies. And so hilarity ensues after that, right? No spoilers. But it's a well-written, well-executed story. It's very popular. And it was completely wrong about the direction of the culture from 1968. I mean, the idea that we would get more fundamentalist and more traditionalist, and the population would explode. Well, I mean, everybody's reading Paul Ehrlich back then and worried about population growth, but what really happened is it was the beginning of a collapse in birth rates and in population growth in every developed country in the world. That developed over the generation after that, and we're still in the middle of that. Maybe I'll talk about that in another segment, because a lot of people don't seem to know that in every developed country in the world, we aren't having enough babies to replace the people in those countries. So big consequences there, but that's a topic for another day. So the point of it is, I mean, Vonnegut was absolutely wrong about what the future would hold. There'd be a collapse in religious belief, and there'd be a collapse in birth rates. But it's a wonderfully written story, and it plays to the biases of people at the time. Just remember, experts are very confident, they're very skilled, they're very knowledgeable in specific areas, and they are often completely wrong about what's coming next. I'm not talking about, I am talking about you, Tom Friedman. I am talking about you, Paul Krugman, and maybe I should pick on other people in the New York Times too, but point being, experts get it wrong. So what about other pop culture? I mean, I'm picking on the baby boomers here. What about 80s movies? What did those movies tell us, people my age growing up? Well, we saw movies like Footloose, right? I mean, all this oppressive authority is, the man is keeping us down. By God, we're going to dance. We're going to push back against those fundamentalists. Another one came out a little later, Dead Poets Society, right? That was quoted. I was kind of coming out of college when that one came out. But, you know, just kids are just being oppressed. Pink Floyd fans know all about this. Oppressed in school and these institutions that are so terrible and so rigid. And we just need to burst out in creativity and finally live and finally grasp life. Was that really what the problem was in our society then? Is the problem in our society now that everybody is too straight-laced? That everybody is too willing to toe the line and get with the program and follow the rules? I don't think that's our biggest problem in 2020. I think fragmentation and collapse and a lack of respect for any authority, and frankly, a lack of authorities who deserve respect, is what we're really facing right now. So the question becomes, what's the real problem? Sometimes, I think, in society, the problem is institutions are too strong, they're too confident, they're too pushy, and it's destroying the creativity and the vitality of the very society those institutions were built from, because there's no room for change or growth or questioning. But sometimes it's the opposite problem. There's a crisis of confidence, there's a crisis of authority, and the last thing we need, are more brilliant, beautiful flowers shooting up in random directions because they're not in good soil to begin with. So, diagnosing the problem, what time are we in? You know where I'm going. This is not 1959, which I believe was the date Dead Poet Society was set in. This is not an overconfident society with a strong sense of its norms that maybe had too little tolerance for discontent, for dissenters. That's not where we are now. We're at the other end of the spectrum right now. This is much more like 1930s, early 1940s than like the 50s and early 60s. So I'll summarize that this way. A healthy society is one where most people respect the norms and kind of cluster around the norms, and there's a decent consensus about some things. But there's plenty of tolerance for people who are out on the edges or are testing new things. As long as they're not upending society or destroying the lives of the people in the middle, there's a good tension there, right? I mean, you don't mind if someone is different from you. There's a gentle, bemused tolerance, and there's an actual interest in exchange of ideas. That's the good balance. You can get out of whack in two different ways. You can have too repressive of a society that doesn't tolerate any dissent. But you can also have a society where there's no confidence in the middle anymore, where there's no something to rebel against, right? Where it's all fragmented, and that kind of pushes a certain kind of dissenter just to look for something ever more extreme for the sake of finding something to rebel against because nobody's pushing back. And that has kind of a vicious cycle to it where there's no healthy tension between the norms of the center and their confidence and the will and and the creativity of the centers and the people on the edges. It's all kind of in a chaos and spiraling out of control. I think we're in a situation like that. And when you're in a situation like that, it never goes on forever. The wheel always turns back to more authority, more centralization. And I don't necessarily mean political centralization, although it can be that way, but I just mean more in the mores, right? I think that as new generations come up, they're craving direction, they're craving authority. You go from the loners of Gen X to the more group-centered attitudes that I think we're going to see with late millennials and the early Gen Z, but we'll see how that goes. I think they will respond to being part of something that they think they can believe in a lot more than the disaffected generations who came of age in a time when the institutions were decaying. So I think that's where we are now, and I've kind of went down quite a road to explain how hard it is to see where we are because of the bias we have in seeing what we want to see. So, if we're going to turn to greater authority, you must think we're in a great spot because we have an incumbent president who is a reality show veteran with an impulse control problem. And now his challenger is a clearly failing elderly man who was just been vetted by Cardi B on national television. Was it Mark Twain or W.C. Fields? Somebody said, God always looks out for drunkards, little children, and the United States of America. And I hope it's still true because we are in a chaotic period right now. So I want to turn briefly, really, to the other side of that opening statement I made. I'm telling you how much you don't know. I'm telling you how humble you have to be. But at the same time, I want to tell you, you know more than you think. You've got gut instincts about your children, about your community, about your family. You have learned how to do your job. There are a lot of experts out there who will spout off in the abstract about this and that and how everything has to be. But you've been grinding it out in reality for a long time, and you know your stuff. And some of those same experts in the media and in politics and in culture are going to make you think you're crazy. They're going to tell you that what you see with your own eyes is not true. They are going to confidently explain that this is the way the whole world is, and you're going to look around and say, well, that's not what I see. And the most extreme form of this is something most people know about. It's called gaslighting. Maybe I'll review the Hitchcock film that came from. But it's this psychological manipulation, sometimes of one individual of another, that says, what you're seeing and you think is real? No. I'm going to manipulate your mind into thinking you're the crazy one. I am trying to project my reality onto you, and you're the crazy one because you don't see what I see. What you see and what you believe makes no sense. That's what I think a lot of us feel in the fire hose of information and ideas that comes at us from media these days. I see this, and you're telling me it's not true. You're telling me I'm crazy. Let's throw this one out. A lot of parents have been told that it's the most normal thing in the world to have this spontaneous, grassroots, instant revolution that decided every library in the country needed to have drag queen story hour. Now, look, if you guys want to go to Hamburger Mary's in Denver for brunch, I'll go, you pay, I'll go along. Fine, time and a place for drag queen shows, that's great. But who decided that there should be this direct pipeline for little kids at story hour in the library? I mean, drag queen shows are fine here. They're not here. There's some sort of common sense reaction that is really not fueled by hatred for drag queens that says, how did that happen? Why are we all even having this discussion about drag queens reading at story hour in libraries all over the country? I guess one of my favorite recent ones was when simultaneously many of the mayors and governors in states affected by rioting opined that it was white supremacists that were doing this. And I thought, wow, yeah, those latent clouds of white supremacists who always are hanging around in downtown Denver or downtown Portland, downtown Seattle, downtown Minneapolis, all these most progressive cities in the country. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's not the video I saw, but it kind of made me think, wow, what an amazing logistical feat. There you are, all 200 of you in your compound in Idaho, and you work it out that under cover of darkness, you're simultaneously in 170 countries, or 170 cities across the country participating in these protests and these disruptions and destruction of statues and burning down police stations. I mean, geez, that's pretty amazing. No, I mean, the white supremacists did not burn down Minneapolis. Okay, I mean, but we had the mayor of Minneapolis suggesting that might be true. We even had our own Governor Polis saying that about Denver. It's like, okay, yeah, well, you're not crazy. There's something else going on. Folks, our elites are pretty decadent, and they're flailing, and they're failing, and something different's going to come out of this. It's maybe pretty depressing looking at the choice at the top, but maybe that quote is right, and God does look out for the United States of America. And when we go through a crisis like we did in the 30s, 1850s, and the 1860s, repeating crises that come and go, somehow we muddle through and the right people appear. So, we're going through a crisis. It will continue for a while. I can't predict exactly what form it'll take or what directions it will take, but it won't go on forever. And there's going to be a turn to greater authority. There's going to be a turn to people who say the old institutions don't work. We need some new ones, and here's what they got to do. And my hope is that just like in previous periods, the United States will not slip off the cliff and not go for authoritarianism or fascist or communist tyranny. But we will find a way to rebuild some shared institutions and some shared values. And you are all a part of that. And so as we're going through that, I want to remind you where we started. You don't know what you don't know. Be humble. Don't assume the worst of that comment on Facebook. Try to draw in other sources. Try to test your biases. Try to increase your knowledge. But at the same time, don't let them tell you you're crazy. Don't let them tell you you don't know anything. Don't let them tell you that what's right before your eyes isn't true when you know it's true, because you know more than you think. This is the Reactionary Hippie. Thanks for giving me some more time with you. I'll look forward to doing it again. Take care.